Fun with History number 27 with Professor Banks. Fun with History number 27 with Professor Banks. Check out this leather I'm sporting. Check out this leather I am sporting. Look at this fabulous leather I am wearing. Leather hat and leather jacket. $0.82, 20 cents, 14 cents, 3 cents. Oh, honey, I love you so much. What do you think? I think we should have a baby. What do you think? Let's have a baby. I love you. Welcome to Fun with History with Professor Banks. And today, we are on our 27th lesson in Fun with History. And today, the lesson is called The Fabulous 50s. So let's get into this, shall we? We are in the era of the 50s, the fabulous 50s. And I'm going to tell you why they were so fabulous in just a second. Fun with History is on the air with Professor Banks. Fun with History, number 27, The Fabulous 50s. And so, shall we see what the Fabulous 50s is all about? Let's do that today. But, before we look at the Fabulous 50s, let us share the joke of the week, okay? So let me do that for you. And this is a good joke, I thought. Alright, there we go. There's my globe. I got my globe and we're ready to go. Okay. So, what happened this week? Well, big thing that happened this week was the kids went back to school, right? So, with that being in mind, I thought I would share this joke. This is kind of a funny joke. It's about school, and these are actual excuses these are actual excuse notes that teachers have received with spelling mistakes in them. Okay, so excuse notes with spelling mistakes. See if you can catch them, okay? Let's go. My son is under a doctor's care and should not take PE today. Please execute him. Please excuse Lisa for being absent. She was sick and I had her shot. Do you get these spelling mistakes so far? These are actual notes teachers have gotten. Dear school, please excuse John, and that's spelled E-K-S-C-U-S-E. John being absent on January 28th, 29th, 30th, 31, 32, and also 33. Please excuse Roland from PE for a few days. Yesterday he fell out of a tree and misplaced his hip. Carlos was absent yesterday because he was playing football. He was hurt in the growing part. The growing part? Megan could not come to school today because she has been bothered by very close veins. Please excuse Tommy for being absent yesterday. He had diarrhea and his boots leak. Please excuse Jennifer for missing school yesterday. We forgot to get the Sunday paper off the porch. And when we found it Monday, we thought it was Sunday. Sally won't be in school a week from Friday. We have to attend her funeral. Please excuse Burma. She has been sick and under the doctor. Under the doctor. Supposed to be under the weather. And this is the last one. Irving was absent yesterday because he missed his bust. Bust. He missed his bust. Supposed to be his bus. So there you go. These are actual notes that teachers have received about their kids not being in school. So with spelling mistakes. So there you have it. All right. So what I want to do today is give you a little crash course on the 50s. Yay, the 50s. We're into the 1950s now after the wars. So this is the fabulous 50s. That's actually what a lot of people have coined this time period. And they are actually also known as the post-war years, or another term that what we are actually entering into from a historical, scholastic viewpoint, what the historians and scholastics start to call this time period, and that's postmodernism. Okay? So that is what we are kind of coming into, postmodernism. Okay? So, I want to just share with you some things that happened in the 50s. Okay? And now, from this point on, history is going to be all mainly from a North America perspective, okay? Because this is where a lot of stuff happens in North America. After the wars are over, North America kind of takes prominence on the world scene because Europe is in a mess. And, of course, two major superpowers coming out of the war, right? What were those superpowers again? Two major superpowers. The USA and the Soviet Union, right? So that's kind of going to be our perspective, looking at it from a North American perspective. Okay? So the first thing you need to be aware of that characterizes the fabulous 50s, and a reason why the fabulous 50s were the way they were. And let's get back to that introduction I had. 82 cents, 20 cents, 14 cents, and 3 cents. What were these? Well, these were prices of items. So milk was 82 cents. Gas was 20 cents a liter. 20 cents a liter, people. Bread was 14 cents a loaf. And a stamp would cost you 3 cents. Okay? So that was prices in the 50s. That's pretty fabulous on its own, is it not? So, maybe that's one reason why you call it the fabulous 50s. But really the big reason why you call it the fabulous 50s is this first point, and that is the boom. It's a good boom, not a bad boom. Not like the atomic bombs in Japan. This is a good boom. So what's happening in the 50s? It actually starts in really 1949, 48-ish as well, because that's the time period my mom was born. What happens is the first boom you got is baby boomers. Okay? And again, that goes back to my introduction. So, a lot of babies were born in this time period. And that is because, why? Why was a lot of babies born? It's because people now believed that the future held nothing but peace and prosperity. Okay? So, nothing but peace and prosperity ahead. Why don't we make a family? So, that is the reason for the baby boom. Okay? So, in this baby boom, some 77 million babies were born. Okay? 77 million babies. That is a lot of babies being born. So, all these people are now, even to this day of age, all these people born in this time period are referred to as the baby boomers. And now the baby boomers are getting older, and that's starting to become a bit of an issue now, because they're like, you know what, all these baby boomers are getting older now, so as they get older, they may need nursing care, they may need more hospitals to put them in, they may need stuff like that. So that's something now they're working on, because, you know, it's important. So, and so that was one thing. Economy. That was a huge thing in the 50s. The economy was booming. At least in North America it was. So basically what was happening was the gross national product had more than doubled. Standard of living had gone up quite a bit, because working wages have gone up as well. Okay, so up, nothing but up. And that was a good thing. So people were making a family. People were doing pretty good for themselves. The economy was doing well. And you have your first credit card coming out in the 50s. So now people are starting to get a credit card. And TV is born. TV, yeah. So, great thing from the 50s. Well, I don't know if it's great, but the birth of the TV. And one show that is a big 50s show that really had really high ratings for quite some time. I Love Lucy. How many people here have seen I Love Lucy? Yeah. My wife watches it quite a bit. I've seen it quite a bit. It's a pretty funny 50s show. But, yeah, the TV. And cars. A lot of cars, too. So cars, almost every family had a car. And some families even had 2 cars. So, economy doing very well here in the 1950s. Now, that is a big reason why they call us the Fabulous 50s, because of all this great stuff happening. Babies being born, the economy doing well, people having things, people having a good standard of living. And the last point I want to make about the boom is, what else was booming? Suburbs. Okay? So suburbs are booming as well. So basically, what was happening with suburbs was lots of developers were buying land on the outskirts of big cities to build modest houses. Okay? This was a huge thing in the 50s, the suburbs. The houses just on the outskirts of the big city. And actually a lot of soldiers that were returning home from the war, a lot of the soldiers actually settled into these homes on the suburbs and started to make their own family as well. So yeah, the suburbs. So a lot of boom, 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 boom happening here in the 50s. Now, one thing we're going to see that kind of comes into the 60s as a result of this was women. Because women were actually, before the wars, women were getting a role outside of the home. Okay? They were getting a role outside of the home. But now, the soldiers are back home. Men are working. Men are doing well. And all of a sudden, women, their role is being diminished. All of a sudden now, they are back into the role of housewives. Okay, and so that's going to lead to more stuff down the road. In the 60s, you're going to see an actual feminist movement that happens, and females are going to start to go out of that home role again and back into a working role in the society. Okay, so there you have it, the boom. Okay, another big thing that happens here in the 50s is this. The beginning of the civil rights movement, okay? So what was happening in the civil rights movement, this was all in the 50s anyway, this was all about the African Americans and black people in the USA. So this was not a new issue, really. This dates back to the Civil War that was like 100 years before this, the American Civil War. And it had just been, basically, it had been something that was a long time overdue to see a movement on this front and to see the minority of African Americans and blacks kind of standing up and starting to say something for themselves, okay? Because when back in the Civil War days, of course, they were slaves. So they were used as slaves a lot. And of course, the Civil War, remember, was all about slavery and being abolished. Slavery was put to death. But these black people still had a say, still had something that needed to be heard from. So blacks finally took action, and really the spark plug in this whole civil rights movement was a case called Brown versus Board of Education. Okay? So basically what was happening was blacks were being segregated from whites in schools. Okay, so what was happening was blacks had their own separate schools and whites had their own separate school. And the black people thought this was a bad way to do things, and they felt like they were getting treated like a minority and not getting treated very well. And they had an absolute solid point. So this family named Brown took up a case against the Board of Education, and their case was this should not be happening. Blacks and whites should not be separated. There is no perfect reason why they cannot be going to the same school together. So it went to the court, and what happened from this Brown versus Board of Education case was the ruling came out in 1954. Separate was inherently unequal, therefore unconstitutional. Okay, so what happened was the court saw it the way the blacks did, and they said, yes, you're right, shouldn't be segregated, and now desegregation is going to be legal. So basically what that means in the short form is blacks and whites go to the same schools together. No separate schools anymore. No more. Okay, so now this still took a while to catch on. After the ruling, it took a while to happen because the white people were not happy with this ruling. And what they still did was they pulled out the people from schools, and they still went to schools out of the city anyway. So they were like, you know what? We don't want that. We want our own school. So this took a while to catch on. It goes into the 60s as well, the civil rights movement. And meanwhile, there's a man, little man. He is currently the pastor of a Baptist church in the South. Some little man named Martin Luther King Jr. Okay? How many here have heard of Martin Luther King Jr.? I hope you have, yes. So he is a pastor in a Baptist church, and he is a black, and he is going to be really high and prominent in the civil rights movement. And you're going to hear a lot more from him in the 60s, and we're going to look at him a little bit more in the 60s too. But keep that in mind, Martin Luther King. Okay, so the beginning of the civil rights movement, all right? And what you had also happening here was a couple other things I want to comment on. The continuation of the Cold War from World War II. So that went on for 3 decades, and it was a very cold war. Communism was trying to spread. The U.S. was afraid of it, and that goes on for quite some time. And we're going to see a major incident in the 60s that involves the Cold War too. It actually is defined as almost World War III. So we're going to look at that further down the road. And this is kind of tied hand in hand with the Cold War, but the start of the Vietnam War. Okay, I talked about that as an aftermath of World War II. So what happened was, of course, the U.S. was afraid that Vietnam was going to become all communists, and if they became all communist, then all of Asia would become communist, and then communism is going to kind of creak right over, and it's going to hit the North America too, and that's not good. We don't want communism. It's bad. Communism is bad. So that's what started the Vietnam War. And the Vietnam War actually technically started in the year, let me get this here. Started in the year 1959. So right at the end of the 50s, you get to start at the Vietnam War, really going into full escalation. And of course, that is kind of like you're for it or you're against it. There was no in between. A lot of Americans were against it, and a lot of Americans were for it. Really nothing in between. And you're going to see some protests happen from that in the 60s as well. Okay, another little thing. What am I doing? I don't know. I'm making a sound effect of Sputnik the satellite. So Sputnik the satellite went up into space. So first real satellite that goes up into space in the 50s, Sputnik the satellite it's called. So it goes up as well. Okay, and what I want to end out with here is something really fun. I'm going to make this a really fun ending here. Is you got the birth of rock and roll. Okay? And so for the teenagers, this is a pretty big movement for them, the birth of rock and roll music. And there is a couple of really prominent people that come onto the scene. And so let me get to that for you, shall I? And Professor Banks is going to get a little musical here on you. With my leather jacket here, too. I'm sporting the 50s fashion. Leather comes out. So, this is my guitar. Yeah, guitar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of samples of 50s music to end this thing out with, okay? Is that cool? Alright. That's what we're going to do, okay? So there is a band that comes out in the 50s, and the band's name is called Bill Haley and the Comets. Okay, they're a big band. They're a pretty popular band, and they come out in the 50s. And, okay, so they come out in the 50s, and one of their most famous songs is this one. And I should give you warning, right off the hip-hop, I am not a guitar player, okay? This was my grandma's guitar. I kept it, and I've always wanted to kind of take it up, but I never have. But I kind of... Let's just say these songs are going to be mostly in one chord, probably, but it's going to be fun, right? So just laugh along. So this is the first one, okay? Bill Haley and the Comets, okay? See if you recognize this tune, shall we? Just give me a second here. Okay, here we go. Are you ready for this, people? Here we go. 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Put your glad rags on and join me, hun. We'll have some fun when the clock strikes 1. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock till the broad daylight. We're gonna rock, 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 gonna rock around the clock tonight. Wow, 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 wow. When the clock strikes 2, 3, and 4. If the band slows down, we'll yell for more. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock till broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Yes, save your applause for later, okay? Yes, thank you. I do encores, so thank you. So as I said, I'm not a guitar player, but just pulling it out for some fun. That was Bill Haley and the Comets' Rock Around the Clock. Okay, so that was a pretty popular song in the 50s. And Bill Haley and the Comets were pretty popular too. So let me give you one from a really famous person. And I'm going to go on to that now. And then I'm sure you can guess who this is. He was a legend. And I have somebody in my family that really loved him. And still one of her favorite artists of all time. So, let's go to this, shall we? Bear with me. Okay, here we go. This is a little bit more softer. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. You have made my life complete, and I love you so. Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams fulfill. For my darling, I love you, and I always will. Yeah! So who was that, people? He was known as the king of rock and roll, and that's Elvis Presley. So Elvis Presley came out in the 50s, and he really took the nation by storm, so to speak, and he was a huge music figure in the 50s. So Elvis Presley, and my mom loves Elvis Presley, so that's kind of dedicated to her. So yeah, he had many songs. That was one of his most famous. So there's a little taste of 50s music for you. This is a little taste of the 50s fashion with my leather jacket. And I kind of told you some of the things that were kind of relevant in the 50s. Low prices, great economy, baby boom, civil rights movement starting. But that's the 50s for you. The fabulous 50s. And it was pretty fabulous because people were having fun. Great music was coming out, and things were going very well in North America, relatively speaking. So, the fabulous 50s, that is our history lesson today. So I hope that you got something out of that. And next week, we're going to dive into the 60s. So we're going to spend a couple weeks on the 60s. Some important stuff happens in the 60s. But we're going to look at that starting next week. So this has been Professor Banks. And his guitar. And this has been the Fabulous 50s. So, until next week, this is Professor Banks, signing off.